Then you've got robotics. I genuinely think that isn't that far away. I think 5 years ago it felt very different, but you can imagine whether it's a store environment and or a distribution environment, this sort of combined humanoid type relationship working alongside.
Jane Mustoe, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast, a fellow Welshie. I'm so happy to be chatting to you. I've been really looking forward to this one, actually.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me along today. I'm also looking forward to it a lot. So it's great to be here.
So let's start off with a bang then. What does good leadership mean to you, Jane?
I think there's a couple of things that make for great leadership. One is making sure you've got your sort of, people call it your vision, your North Star, where you're looking to go, where you're trying to head to, what you want to be. And I think having clarity around that super important, and being able to paint that sort of picture for the people you work with to align behind. I think alignment, super important. It's really key that people talk about that vision, but they all really understand what the essence of it is, that they understand what's involved in getting us from where we are to that vision. And that alignment is, again, key, especially in large organizations, but even smaller ones, that you're all heading in the same direction. And then I think it's about really getting out of the way and allowing those who know what they're doing to do what they do, and ideally unblocking things as you go. So that would be great leadership for me.
Brilliant advice. Yeah, I think alignment and getting out of people's way is easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, was it Richard Branson who said, don't hire good people and tell them what to do, get them to tell you what to do. That's the whole point of hiring good people. And I think that rings so true. So let's talk about, we've already established we're fellow Swansea University alumni.
Yeah.
You obviously left and got into the graduate scheme at NatWest. Talk us through that early part of your career. Why did you pursue that sort of banking IT direction, and how has that shaped you in terms of the direction of your career?
Look, my degree was sort of maths, computer science, engineering based, with a bit of management science on top, and it really sort of invited me into the world of technology and science in some ways, and engineering, and what was possible. So I think through the course that I did, I started to find an interest in how technology could really enable and influence the future, and how we could get things done more quickly, more effectively, more efficiently, leveraging the technology, even although that time ago, to accelerate the outcomes that we all wanted to go after. And I still believe that's the case. And so I was always interested in trading. There was a book I read in my late teens called The Nest of Vipers. And I don't know, it really hit my imagination around trading, what it was the world, how fast it was. And
sorry, Jane, can you say the name of that? What was it called?
It was called The Nest of Vipers.
Oh, okay, I've not heard of that one. We'll have to put that on the show notes.
It just made me want to join that world a little bit. And my degree was such that actually, in those days, becoming a trader wasn't necessarily such an easy route or path to navigate, but I could see a route where actually trading was changing, electronic trading was becoming much more of a thing. So I decided to apply to their graduate scheme as a technology graduate, and I was lucky enough to get a place.
You obviously didn't come from a technical background, though, Jane, in your degree. It was more of a business management degree, yeah? So how did you adapt to IT and technology? Was that always in you? Was it always an interest there, or was it something that sort of happened in the moment when you were applying for that job?
It was a bit of both, because in my degree, I did do computer science. Always used to make me laugh now looking back at the computers that we actually had to work on. So we had to do an element of programming, an element of architecture, technical architecture. We also had to leverage sort of statistical models to help plan with operational logistics in the degree. So the degree was quite a broad and rounded degree, and it was quite mathematics heavy. So we were the early days, I think, of designing in computer science, UX, UI, which is what we call it today, but really those digital interfaces, which are moving away from, in those days, the mainframes and the green screens to a much more digital interface. So my degree absolutely touched on that. I think what was really nice about it as well is it gave me an insight into corporate world, and coming from where I did, that wasn't something I really understood or had seen growing up where I did. So it was a good insight. And then, like I said, the graduate program threw you in and immersed you into the world of technology straight away. So
yeah, sure. I just wanted to talk about transformation very quickly then. So you've obviously led transformation in super highly regulated environments like financial services. What sort of habits or disciplines from banking have you taken into Tesco from a transformation and IT change standpoint?
So look, when you are doing any form of transformation, back to what are the outcomes and objectives that you've set to do that, I think being super clear is critical, and getting scope really clear is critical. And I think industry agnostic, if you're not clear on what is in scope and what is not in scope, you end up drifting, and you see it quite often, and things get added, and before you know it, you're already double the size, double the complexity, double everything, and yet the time frames around you aren't necessarily changing. So I think, look, good discipline around, the word governance is quite often deemed by some as like, oof, heavy, shouldn't be there. Actually, good governance enables speed of decision making, enables risks to be mitigated and managed properly, enables transparency, which for me on any transformation is probably the one thing I think goes without saying, has to be there. Our jobs are there to manage the risks. There are risks when you're changing something that's been in situ for 30, 40 years to something new that's actually not just about replacing it like for like, but reimagining it in a different way. You've got to really think hard about how you're going to transition that, how the risks are going to be mitigated and managed, and minimizing those, but without, stopping the machine as well, because these are typically much larger scale changes and therefore need to be managed in a way that, like I said, has the right governance, right control, and right transparency around them. So that's what I would say I took across for sure.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. That makes total sense. So you lead now, going to the present day, you now lead innovation labs at Tesco. So what does that function actually look like in practice? How would you explain your role, and what does innovation look like in an organization like Tesco?
Yeah, so look, the lab's part of my role, which is looking at, it's a small team. What it's looking at is across multiple horizons, the technology that's available at any point in time. So 2 years, 5 years, 10-year horizons.
Yeah.
And we're looking across industry. We're not held up on, is it the manufacturing industries or retail, banking, financial services? It's really just saying, that's interesting technology. Is there an application or way that could help us in the retail industry, and what do we think? And is it really doing what it says? Because as we know, with lots of new technologies, when they arrive, they're not always as fit for purpose or robust as they need to be on day one, right? And so part of it is really testing, especially for scale organizations like Tesco. We need to make sure that anything we're putting in is safe, secure, of course, and can scale. So whether it's testing things like drones, which about 3 years ago we were trialing, they're coming back again now because, again, they will have improved. When we trialed those, you get loads of lessons. You keep it on the radar because you think, well, it may be not right now, and it wasn't right 3 years ago, but maybe next iteration, the things that we saw that weren't quite working, they fixed, or things have moved on. And really what then we do in labs is test that technology, try and break it where possible, try and find the right application of it. And then we work with the businesses to say, look, we think this could be something over the next 2-5 years that you may want to adopt. Sometimes that's much quicker, sometimes that's much slower. So it gives us a real place to experiment, test and learn fast.
Yeah. Sorry, Jen, I can't leave that one there. You mentioned drones. I've got to ask you about that.
That's all good.
How far away are we from drones delivering our shopping? Please tell me it's coming up soon.
It is. Look, it's already happening in China. When you go there, you can see like chains of drones.
Grocery shopping? Is it?
Is that happening in China? Yeah, small deliveries of deliveries. We also, we trialed robots delivery in Milton Keynes. They're called Starship. We did a large experiment with that. People loved them, and they could take up to sort of 2 shopping bags worth of groceries. And like I said, the drones that we tried also. I think that the bigger complexity won't be the technology itself. There'll be a couple of things which will be airspace.
Yeah.
Who manages the airspace, regulates the airspace.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's hard, isn't it?
And then there's a customer angle. Some customers may love it, some may not like the idea of things flying around the sky and things being delivered and where they're delivering to. I don't know. It'll be varied for different customers, I think.
Yeah. Because the airspace one, that's a big challenge, isn't it? Because you obviously got loads of competing companies with drones flying around. So you need to have a centralized air traffic control. That's right. Obviously at that altitude, which is obviously not going to be aeroplane or helicopter altitude, but there's like another layer, isn't it?
Yes,
and that's
exactly. It will come. It's not far away. We're re-looking at it again. There are definitely companies that are investing. You always see it where the companies are investing more, but it has a real purpose in some of the more remote islands as well, where it's harder to get there otherwise by ship or airplane. It's sometimes that in between bit. And look, there are also congestion. The roads are busy. It's tough on the roads. We want to take some of that stuff away. So I think it's single digit years away, not long time away now.
What about staff? Stores with no staff in them, and you just walk out. Is that sort of on the horizon? What other type of innovations
that's already
are you looking at?
So we have a store. So about 3 years ago. Now 2 or 3 years ago, we rolled out a store called GetGo. From a customer perspective, it's in Holborn. You scan your club card on arrival. You pick up your grocery as you go around the store, and you walk out the store.
Right.
And the payment's taken as you leave. So there's no need for you to interact with a till or payment. It just gets done automatically. We had a couple of those. Interestingly, they have their operating model challenges, right, for customers. Some customers, don't want to always scan a club card, but sometimes there's something the psychology of walking in, picking up some grocery and walking out is quite interesting. Some people I don't really like it. I feel like I've done something wrong. It just doesn't
feel right, does it? Yeah.
But I think
I actually did it in one of the Amazon stores in London.
Right,
you obviously saw them.
Yes.
And it was just weird. I didn't actually buy anything in the end, but I just felt bizarre. But there we are.
Yes.
But I'm sure it'll take a while to get used to.
Yeah. And then we have something we call Magic Tills in Tesco, which is quite popular. We have it on campus as well in our store in campus, where you literally go in, you pick up your groceries that you want, and when you walk to the till just lists out everything that you've got. Now that's quite nice. No scanning, straight to payment, and out you go. From a customer point of view, we get super positive feedback about things like that.
Fantastic. You got to spill the beans on some other ones, Jane. What other innovation are you guys working on at the moment that's going to have an impact on retail generally?
So look, it wouldn't be podcast related to tech if we didn't mention AI. That's inevitable, and I'm sure we're going to come on to that a little bit more. But look, I think we've been using AI, machine learning, and science for 2 decades, at least in Tesco, whether it's around forecasting, availability, waste management for our food products, mileage of our vans. I was saying to someone a week before Christmas, we do something like 13 trips to the moon and back in that 1 week, just delivery mileage, right? So actually optimizing for that using what is good old-fashioned machine learning, data science, is really important for us, right? Because every mile matters.
Yeah.
But then you look at generative AI and where that's going. We've literally, I've been lucky enough to work on a new digital assistant that we just literally launched on the 8th of April. We did some announcements. We're launching to colleagues first so that we can use them as our learning ecosystem. Because, with all generative AI and the new digital world of digital assistants, we don't actually know necessarily how customers are going to interact with it, how it's going to evolve, what's important to them, how it's going to be used. And it's not as black and, it's not as binary as before, in the sense of, you put something in, you get an output. You can put something in and get a different output because of the way the models work. So testing for that and really using our 300,000 colleagues to help us design. We've already got a great product, but help it improve and design that further before we launch to customers later this year is really important. And that's going to help customers with things like meal planning, using up food in their fridge, making sure that helps with then waste reduction, help them budget with the food that they have, help them if they're vegetarian in their family group, or if they're a vegetarian, come up with recipe ideas that allows them very quickly to add those ingredients into their basket. So it's about helpfulness for our customers to spend less time. And spend less time doing things that, time is precious. So the easier we can make those moments, the easier we can do things for them around their shopping, around their meal planning, around helping them with their everyday tasks. I think the real value will be seen. So new innovation in generative underway, and loads of great stuff to come.
So innovation is obviously central to what everything we're talking about, and central to your daily role, of course. How do you cultivate a culture of innovation in your immediate team, and also the wider? How does the company go about it in the wider organization?
Look, it starts from the very top, from the CEO and the exec, who are ultimately super interested in innovation, super interested in what's happening with the industry, but just generally technology and the world of the tech sort of titans around us and what's happening. I think the second part of that is customers, right? They've still got to be at the heart of everything we do, and our colleagues. And I think there's this balance of where technology is helpful, useful, is driving value, and innovation the same, whether that be food innovation, farming innovation, and or operational innovation in your organizations, in store, in distribution centers. It has to be sort of done with purpose and done with sort of a meaningful sort of direction. Otherwise, you're just trialing stuff for the sake of trialing cool tech if you're not careful. Sure. And I think we're very anchored in our customer, and we're very anchored in doing the right thing by our customers. And that means that every bit of technology that we invest in a very tight margin business, it means that we really think hard about where we want to invest that to drive the best benefit we can. Look, and then culturally, we're all very curious. We talk about curiosity a lot, and we've got some amazing colleagues across the business and technology. And our tech organization is, I think, I've been there 6 years now. It's one of the most sort of driven to try things, to learn, to experiment, to move quickly, to not get hung up when things don't work as well as we may had hoped at that point, and in some places stopping and starting again, right, when things haven't worked. And I think that comes across the organization, and we're always encouraging our teams to try something, and then to share, because whether it's worked or not worked, it's the sharing of that we all learn together. So there is this real collective feeling of progress, testing, trying new things, but at the core, knowing what we are as a business and why we're doing that for our customers, right? And if you can anchor to that, then most of the things you try and test for, even if it's 1 out of 10 that's successful, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. So I know, obviously, online purchasing for groceries is becoming increasingly popular. And I know you guys obviously to the moon and back. I never heard that before. That's interesting. But it's obviously, on that digital journey, you can essentially trace the steps of the customer, and then obviously you've got a feedback loop. When someone's walking around a store, it's less so. I mean, do you know what I mean in terms of shelf space and stuff like that. I know it's a war going on for shelf space with all these brands, isn't it, in Tesco? But how do you track customer behavior then in physical environments like stores? Have you got any other, like, how would you go about customer profiling and trying to improve the customer experience?
Look, I mean, it's really important that we never sort of would track customers without them knowing, firstly. So we're not sort of got weird cameras everywhere trying to see what's going on. But we do know how the flow through of a store, the design of the store, the layout of the store affects purchasing behavior, because we've got enough stores and enough different types of stores to understand how we see the fluctuation when you put fresh at the front or baking at the back, and as you move products and shelves around. And there's enough science and history that tells us, when you put a prominent front shelf edge or advertising, that it does drive people to those places. And of course, deals, promotions and things like that. I think where it gets really interesting, though, is that more and more the sort of combined digital and physical of a shopping experience and online is going to become really important. And so one of the things that we are absolutely looking at and using is things like simulation or digital twins. And we use synthetic customer data, right? So these days with AI, we can create hundreds of thousands of customers based on synthetic data that mock up how a customer would behave. And then you can run lots of different scenarios in the mock-up of a shop or store that shows the flow through the sort of patterns that we think based on the shopping history that we have of lots of our customers, knowing what they buy, when they buy it. And look, we also do the good old-fashioned, what I call time and motion studies, to sit in a store to see how long people spend in an aisle, to spend how much time browsing in an aisle, to see if products are being replaced in different parts, right? Someone picks one up and then puts it back somewhere else. It tells you actually quite a lot. Also, the queuing at tills, we that's a big area for us, because you never really want any length of queue at a till. So from an experience, we're very clear around how long our customers spending their time, and therefore how would you design the store the best way. So digital simulation, digital twins, definitely going to be something, I think, and more synthetic customer testing. Never beats the real thing, but gives you a really good proxy for what is happening.
So when you say digital twins, you obviously have a digital environment to test certain products, strategies, behaviors, etc. Is that
basically mocks up the physical? So you have this like visual of a physical store in digital form.
Yeah.
And so then you can see, digital humans being mocked, flowing through the stores. And like I said, you run a number of what if scenarios. So what if you put confectionery all in this aisle, in this layout? What happens to that behavior when you run millions of customers through? Do we see an uplift in confectionery sales, or do we see a decrease in something, or decrease in those sales? So you're testing lots and lots of different scenarios based on the layout of those stores, the range that you have on those shelves. And that simulation then gives you sort of an indication of how you think, if you change something like the shelf layout that you're talking about, or the range within those shelving, how that might impact the customer experience, how it might impact the sales.
Wow.
All
That's
of those.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It is amazing. It's going to be a massive unlock for lots of companies and industries, and lots of industries already using them.
Yeah, for sure. We actually had the CTO of Ocado on a number of years ago. He was talking about using digital twins then for various purposes, but it was lesser known back then. But I think it seems to be popping up everywhere now, and this is obviously a great environment, an industry for this type of thing, isn't it? But so we've talked about digital twins, autonomous stores. I wanted to talk about other sort of manifestations of AI. How do you see AI popping up and improving Tesco in terms of customer experience, supply chain efficiency, whatever?
Yeah.
What are the use cases of AI are you excited about?
So I think it will pop up everywhere, right? I don't think any area will be sort of immune to having some form of AI related activity happening, whether, like you said, it's in store, whether it's in the supply chain itself. And I think, look, there's probably a couple of areas for me which I think will get really interesting. If you take out the food science, food technologies, farming technologies, because I do think that's a phenomenal area of innovation that will hopefully, for the better, change farming practices and environmental challenges that we have and fix for some of those areas. I think more operationally and from a customer perspective, operationally, supply chain, I think back to the digital twin simulation, end to end, being able to see how when you change a price or a promotion and see what the effect has on your ordering, your forecasting, the ability to reduce your waste, but make sure your availability is great. The ability to then transport that into your depots, into your cages, out of your cages, into the store, right? I think that effectiveness, that's hugely complex. And today we do it in a much more siloed nature. Being able to connect the science, I think, is going to change as well how we make decisions and the roles then of the teams themselves, right? From doing lots of work and analysis to making decisions. I think then you've got robotics. I genuinely think that isn't that far away. I think 5 years ago it felt very different. When you go anywhere now, the talk of robotics, I think the software's already there. I think it's really now about the final bits of hardware. But you can imagine whether it's a store environment and or a distribution environment, this sort of combined humanoid type relationship working alongside, whether it's all sorts of roles, picking, serving, and you're seeing it in airports today where your food gets delivered by a machine that says, this is your plate number, help yourself, take it away. They've already started happening. And then I think last but not least, from a customer perspective, you've got everything like personalization, and really trying to get the experience for you and for me to be what we want it to be. Now that's the art. That's going to be the ultimate goal, is when you're getting the service you want in the way you want it, in the form you want it, that makes life easy. And that's the probably utopia of where we want to get to, but that will require lots of great data, lots of real sort of test and learn around personalization, and really lots of new technologies around how we interact, because the app has been king for a long time. I think it will for time to come, but I think there'll be other channels, and we're seeing it with already the LLMs. People are moving to more conversational, more voice-driven interactions, and I think we're multi-generational. So again, I always put that spin on, we've got many generations working with us and our customer base. So we're going to have to be thoughtful about how it shows up, where it shows up, and for whom.
Yeah, sure. So I've got to ask you about this. There was something in the media recently about dynamic real-time pricing that supermarkets were potentially looking at, which would probably need electronic labeling of products.
Right, yeah.
Because everything is still printed out and put on there. I can't see that lasting long. So obviously, if it's electronic pricing, then that enables you to change prices easily on a keyboard somewhere without having to obviously physically change prices, sort of thing. So how far away is that's? I probably inevitable, Jane, isn't it? That's going to happen at some point. It enables you to control margin better. Yeah. How far away is that?
Yeah, the pricing bit I'm not going to touch on, because I think that's a whole realm of discussion, right, for customers, for policy, for all sorts of reasons. Should you, would you, when, if you see what I mean?
Of course.
From a technology
I don't want to get you in trouble, Jane.
No. I don't want to get myself in trouble, Gareth. Don't worry about it. But it's a complex area, right? And there are reasons why changing price may make sense or not, right? But if you think about pricing and how important it is for our customers, that's quite a biggie. I think in terms of the application of it, though, we're already there. So you will have seen, we will have announced recently, and some areas and certainly in the US and Australia, the retailers already using electronic shelf edge, it's called, which is really, to your point, it's allowing us to change all of those printed labels, which again, great that we're not having to print all of that paper in some ways and get it stuck. And it's quite an intensive sort of role to keep changing those prices. And they do change, quite frequently, to having that all digital and being able to be changed at a touch of a button across all the estate. And look, I think that has real positives for both, again, us and the customers, and keeps everything real time and make sure that we're not sort of missing out and people aren't missing out on good offers and good price.
So I want to go back to something you mentioned just now, which is obviously I think technology will improve as we go forward, which is wastage. Wastage in supermarkets is obviously a very well documented issue. Wastage is obviously something we want to minimize. How do you, and I'm sure you've probably talked about this from an innovation standpoint, how can technology potentially improve or minimize the amount of wastage in the future? Is there anything you're working on or you've worked on to that end?
Yeah, we're working on it all the time because, to your point, it's both financially costly, but it's also not great for the sustainability angle and the environment. And no one wants to be getting rid of food that we don't have to, right? So, look, the science I talked about before, we are constantly working on new science, new models to refine how we improve that stock management. So how we improve the flow and the ordering accuracy of what we need into our stores, and therefore not over ordering. But not under ordering, because if you under order, of course, you probably get less waste, but at the same time, customer experience is rubbish because they're not getting the products they want. If you over order and you have too much of the product, it's great from a customer perspective. They generally can get what they want every time, but it generally means, you get a slight overflow of product left. So you're trying to balance that availability question to get the customers what they want with that waste question. There are also things that we're doing in our own supply chain around how your goods are transported, how they're stored, because again, you get damage and waste along that process. So it's really important that we're working with our suppliers all the time to make sure that that is as optimal as it possibly can be, so that we're not having to throw away waste. And again, that comes through AI, generative AI, looking at what's coming in, what products are coming in, why they've been damaged. And over time, you start to see patterns of, well, that's odd because this sort of product from this sort of supplier seems to be having a bit of a challenge. It's coming in damaged, or we're damaging it through the process. What do we need to change about the packaging? Do we need to change something about the transportation? So there's lots of things that are being done to look at that all the time, because as you say, it's really important for us.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know, and that's really assuring. But okay, so I want to get back onto AI then. So I'm really keen to understand how much AI usage in terms of LLMs and things like that, at least for content creation and improving an idea curation and stuff like that, ideation. How much is it part of the day-to-day, your day-to-day life in Tesco, and how much do you encourage it with your employees and your team?
We actively encourage using them, but using the ones that the enterprise have signed up to within our own technology safety net, right? What we don't, obviously, always something we talk about all the time is, please do not go outside of the network, because the moment you do and you're using any data that's Tesco data, you would be sharing that with broad audiences. And we've seen companies, unfortunately, fall foul of that with in the papers and stuff. So look, there's an active campaign around keeping ourselves safe, keeping our data safe, keeping that within the walls of Tesco. Once you're in those walls, though, I mean, we are really active in encouraging adoption of whether it's Microsoft Copilot, whether it's some of our LLMs within the technology organizations. We partnered with Mistral recently. We're using OpenAI for the digital assistant that we've got. So we use a mixture of models that we are encouraging, certainly in the technology world, to use and look at applications of them and use cases, again, within our test environments, to see if there's value, because just because you can doesn't mean they're all value creators. They also take energy costs to run. But from a workforce perspective, like I said, you talked about idea generation. Look, we run a number of online courses. We roll out materials. We get people to use it. We've got great adoption. We're around 75%, I would say, across the organization, which for us is really great. We're looking to push that further. We've been on this journey probably 12, 18 months. It is a great place to start thinking, or giving yourself that initial framework, initial set of ideas.
Yeah.
But we always say it augments you, it doesn't replace you.
Of course.
And that's really important, because how you ask it a question, how you interact with it, how you use it for research, for idea generation, for writing emails or documents, means that, back to the guardrails, you get hallucinations, you get all sorts of things happening. So you still need to be what we call a human in the loop, and we still need to make sure that we're using it in an appropriate way for the task that you're trying to do. So, look,
exactly.
hugely encouraged, because it does unlock lots of things and remove lots of administration. I love it for managing Outlook and meeting transcripts. And, to your point, content generation, the marketing team would say they use it all the time now. And more and more. But that just means that, they've got more input, more generation, speed, it changed more rapidly. So yeah, definitely being adopted and used, and definitely encouraged to do so.
It's incredible for learning new skills as well.
Isn't it?
If you put the bot on and you have a conversation with it, with whatever, Grok or any of them, and just talk to it about a subject, and then obviously, you don't feel so stupid asking a basic question because it's a bot, and you can just really get to the heart of what it is you want to learn. It's amazing for that type of thing.
I can't wait for it to come to schools, if I'm honest. I think for kids it's going, I know people worry about it, but actually if you get your sports, your arts, your dramas, your music's going strongly, so you've still got that, I think one-on-one learning, it's going to be amazing.
100%. I've got my daughters 11 and 7, and I've tried to get them using LLMs more, but they seem more interested on the image generation part of it.
Strange.
But there we are.
All good.
That's it.
All good.
So I wanted to ask you as well then, so just in terms of AI governance, what sort of, do you have like a governance policy in Tesco? Do you sort of closely manage it, or is it something that you're just finding your feet like maybe most organizations are?
Yeah, well, we've got an AI governance body. It's made up of some key members across the organization. The head of analytics and data science and data at Tesco, Ruben, he runs that and chairs that. And he makes sure that every AI initiative that we are thinking about doing, how we're using it, sort of flows through there for a sort of risk assessment. And it's quite light touch in many ways. It doesn't stop you trying things, testing things, unless it would be deemed high risk, high risk. But in general, it's a forum to make sure that we are doing it the right way, that we're procuring things in the right way. And again, we're bringing them into our environment in a safe way. And so our colleagues can then test to see if they are adding value or not. So at any one time, we have around 250, 300 things going on, all linked to a strategy though. So this isn't just random. It is a link to some of our key strategic priorities. They all tag up to one of those priorities so that we know, again, we're not getting lost in the world of just using AI for AI's sake. We're using it where it's generating real value, and we can see the alignment back up to that driver strategic priority. So but we do have a governance.
Absolutely. Well, that's a lot more than some organizations have in place. But yeah, that's fantastic. But you mentioned something earlier, which was really interesting, about, AI is not going to replace people. It's just augmenting what people are doing and elevating, whatever they're working on, or elevating the quality generally. But nonetheless, obviously, because of that augmentation, it does tend to mean that companies perhaps hire less as a result of the supercharging the existing employees. Do you see what I mean? Have you noticed that with Tesco, certainly at the entry level? Are you hiring less graduates than you used to? Are you hiring people maybe in the mid-range, in terms of intermediate level experience, less than potentially that you were, say, 5 years ago? Because I know that's the case with some organizations, which is very well documented. How is that picture playing out in Tesco?
So I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about being at Tesco is, as we've grown the organisation, especially in tech, we've doubled to about 6,000 colleagues now over the last 5 years. We've done that really thoughtfully. And I think, and what I mean by that is that, look, you can never say never, and I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, to look to the future of what may or may not happen in terms of AI and the impact. But what I can say is we've never gone too wild in overhiring or growing too quickly. And what we've tried to do is augment where we have with organizational supports, third parties to help with that, but in a really nice balance where we've then grown our permanent capabilities and making sure we've got a pipeline from graduates all the way through to senior tech and succession all the way through, and career development, career paths is really important aspect of how Tesco works. And I think, look, as a result, because we haven't gone over wild on hiring at certain times, like through the pandemic. Yes, we grew, but it was in a much more sort of control way. We haven't gone through the other cycle of completely going the other way. And I think, look, our business is slightly different, and we have loads to do still, and lots of growth potential ahead of us. And so I think we're in a nice steady sort of place, which is allowing us to leverage the best of the technology, including the entry level. Because as we all know, Gareth, it's all about what you leave for the future. My job now is about the talent that's coming through and the people who are going to be able to, and our colleagues who are going to make Tesco successful for another 100 years. And that has to be what, we all look to. And so if we don't bring that talent through at that level, entry level, we're going to have gaps, which actually will cause us real problems, I think, later on.
Yeah. Very well said. I think that's really interesting. But okay, so we're coming towards the end then. So I've got a couple of questions to wrap up, okay? What are you most excited about, Jane, in relation to AI proliferation? And I'm not talking about Tesco or even retail. I'm talking generally, life, society, business, whatever.
Look, for me, it's always been, and I've always been fascinated in this, which is nuclear fusion. I think the time we can create energy that is sustainable, clean, available everywhere from, products that aren't causing radiation, like nuclear fission, etc., that is truly clean and abundant, then I think we're on to a whole different society and a whole different world.
Okay.
And I've always felt that, and I know it's becoming a thing. And I've talked to people who work in that space, and years and years ago, it seemed like it was a never-ending thing. But I think even with quantum on the horizon, and with now generative AI accelerating the science behind it, and accelerating the ability to maybe capture that energy, because we know we can fuse it, but capture that energy and make it available for consumption. Okay. I hope that's the massive unlock, because I feel that with energy, if you think about everything we do, produce clothes, food, live, it's all about that consumption of energy.
Yeah,
the irony is AI takes up a lot of energy, and we see that in papers all the time. Sure. So even more important that we find some sort of sustainable, clean way of doing that without impacting the climate and impacting the environments we live in. But for me, that would be the massive unlock, which balances the world out a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer, and very, very compelling. I'm always ask the guests this question, and I'm really keen to understand what your answer would be. So I understand, Jane, you've got a long way to go in your career, and you're certainly not done yet. But looking back now to that young lady who graduated from Swansea University, 21-year-old self, what would you say to that person? What advice would you give to that person, knowing what you know now?
There's a couple of things, probably. One is, if you are not sure what you want to do, that's okay. But pick something and give it a go. And I think by trying one way or the other, you'll either love something, not like it so much, or not like it at all. But it helps you start to frame the direction you want to take, because you just don't know. Some people are very passionate and have a real clarity of what they want to do, where they want to go. And I think that's amazing, but that's not for everyone. And I certainly wasn't. If I look back to my 21-year-old self, I wouldn't have said I'd be sat here doing this exactly. Saying that, I love the transformative element of what technology can do. And I've always loved the difference it can make. So for me, what I would be saying is stay curious, stay open to lots of different things that will impact you and people that will impact you through your career. And making a decision, I always think, is really important for yourself. You own your career. And some companies are brilliant at helping you navigate that. Some are less good. So it's really important you own it, and making sure you realize that it doesn't matter what the decision is, there's never a wrong decision. I always think that's really true. Yeah, 100%. Some people worry a little bit about making a decision and feeling they get locked. that isn't the case. You make a decision, you'll learn something, and then you'll make another decision. But make the decision and sometimes take the risk. But it's worth it. And generally, one way or the other, something good comes of it.
Yeah. We're really bad in Britain, aren't we, at making mistakes? Do you know what I mean? So we're risk averse. We don't lean into mistakes and then almost embrace them as part of the learning journey, which seems to be built into, say, Americans, for instance, who brag about mistakes and failures as a badge of honor. In Britain, we tend to stay away from potential mistakes and therefore don't take as many risks, which I think is probably something that we need to consider looking at a different way, So, but yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's an interesting take. So I can't leave you go, Jane, without asking you for I know you mentioned a book earlier on, but if you could give us a book that you've been inspired by recently. And by the way, if you're not much of a reader, an additional piece of content is fine, a documentary or an article or whatever. A piece of content that you've been inspired by recently.
I think the one that I was looking at the other day, and I was just trying to find the book, that it's called The Silk Road. It's a book about basically how over hundreds of years, how economic power has shifted from east to west and where we are now, and the take on where we are now, right? And how the world is shifting again at a very sort of tumultuous time, to say the least. Yeah. So it's a fascinating book, because as much as I think history has a part to play and we should always look to the past. There's often 100%. Interesting patterns. We have choices we can make to change it, that we don't do things again. So, but it is a fascinating read on that dynamic between East and West. And I think for where we are now, it just felt like a good book to read.
100%. Yeah, I think looking at the past in order to predict the future is obviously the best. We look at data to predict the future. Well, that's what history is. You know what I mean? Even though the data is often a bit shaky, but nonetheless, the old adage of history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme is so true, isn't it? And
it is. Yeah. So it's a nice read.
The Silk Roads, a new history of the world by Professor Peter Frankopan. Does that sound familiar?
Thank you. Yeah.
I got that. That will go on my reading list along with the other 50,000 books I'm waiting to read. But that one looks right up my street, actually.
Yeah, no, it's great. Really good.
Yeah, but look, Jane, I'm so pleased you agreed to come on. It's been a fantastic conversation. You've shared some amazing snippets of wisdom, which I'm sure our listeners will love. So yeah, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you very much, Gareth. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my conversation with a brilliant Jane Mustoe from Tesco. If you enjoyed the discussion on AI, innovation, and of course the future of retail, please give us a like, subscribe, and share the episode. And also let us know in the comments what really stood out for you.